guys, and I have named it the Love and Murder series in honor of Valentine's Day that is coming up. So I have researched for you several cases that happened on Valentine's Day, and I'm going to share them with you this week. I was completely horrified by several of these cases, as I usually am, and really wanted to share them with you guys. So we're going to start with a solved case, which I know a lot of you guys really like because there's nothing left hanging. And this is a type of case that I have never told you guys about before, but I'm not going to spoil it, and I'm just going to tell you what happened. So we are going to talk about Richard Schoeck today, and we're starting in Georgia. Richard and Stacy had a little Valentine's Day rendezvous planned in a park, and we're back in 2010. Now, a little background. Richard was Stacy's fifth husband, and Stacy's cousin Connie recalls that Richard was the best of the five. In fact, Richard had even adopted two of Stacy's three sons. Connie says Richard was a great father to them. He brought a lot to the table when it came to their marriage. Now, 56-year-old Richard had a passion for hot air ballooning. He was an avid outdoorsman, and he was an artist. But most of all, he loved scouting, and he was a den leader for his children's Boy Scout, Cub Scout group. Richard was described as a fine man, very community-minded, and a compassionate person. He was a busy but very well-liked man. If something was broken or someone needed help, Richard was there. He could fix anything, and he was the ultimate problem solver. He just would help anybody do anything. And his wife, Stacy, was, well, she was described as the breadwinner of the family. She worked as the head administrator for a large medical practice in DeKalb County, Georgia. Some kind of spine institute, I believe. I didn't really find the exact name, but it's not relevant, so. Stacy was described as a woman who would work her booty off to make sure that her kids had everything that they wanted and needed. But of course, you have to make time for love, right? So, on Valentine's Day, he was cooking dinner for himself and Stacy and her grandparents. They were an elderly couple that Stacy and Richard took care of. They needed round-the-clock medical attention. At this point, Stacy and Richard had Valentines to exchange for each other and gifts and cards. Stacy makes the decision that they would exchange them in the park. She tells Richard, "Go ahead, meet me there. The nurse that's relieving me is just a little bit late, but I'll meet you, and it'll be great." So they make their way there in separate cars. It's a dark, windy road, and Richard gets there first, of course, and he notices there's someone else there in the shadows. This park was described by a police officer, a lieutenant, as a very secluded place. No pavement, no lights, very eerie, especially at night. So you have to wonder why Stacy is wanting Richard to meet her there. What happens next isn't exactly known, but 30 minutes later, Stacy pulls up and she sees Richard on the ground, full of bullets, lying in the officers to the scene, and he immediately says something just did not sit right. This shooting really appeared way too over the top to be random. Richard is just a regular guy who's unarmed, and he gets there and he's comfortable enough to get out of the truck and approach this person who ultimately shoots him, says Lieutenant Franklin. And in that darkened night, the mystery killer is already gone by the time Stacy says she arrives. Detectives scour the crime scene looking for anything they can use as evidence, but there's not a lot to go on. But the soft dirt did speak volumes to the investigators. It was muddy and it preserved tire impressions very well. Imprinted in the mud were 3 sets of tire tracks. They saw Richard's, they saw Stacy's Ford Explorer, but the 3rd set that came in from the park, you could follow them back to the road. So that told Lieutenant Franklin that somebody was there before Richard got there and left, presumably after he was dead. The cops, of course, believed these had to be the tracks of the killer, but matching them to a car is like a needle in a haystack, right? Before the cops can worry about how to make a match between the tires and the car, a frantic Stacy makes a shocking admission. I'm so sorry if you can hear my tummy. She says that she's been having an affair with a man named Juan Rees, and they have not even left the scene yet. She says, I'm in deep with Juan. It's been going on for several years, and this really got Lieutenant Franklin's attention, and they start looking at Juan as a prime suspect. Mr. Rees worked in the office with Stacy, and despite the fact that he had no medical experience, she had hired him as a surgical assistant in the clinic that she ran. She told police that he had previously worked as a security guard at a swanky hotel. Looks like it's a crime of passion, right? Jealous boyfriend wants Stacy's husband out of the picture. When they asked Stacy if she thought Juan was responsible, she said she didn't want to think that, but she didn't know. So police investigate Juan, and they discover that he's a divorced father with a bunch of kids, and he's pretty hard up for money. Stacy was showering him with goodies. She paid for his truck, his cell phone. She took him on romantic getaways. He even lived in one of the houses that she owned. It was their secret love nest, I guess. Juan Rees became suspect number 1 in Richard's murder. The cops grab him the next day at the office, and he even agrees to talk to detectives without a lawyer. But he denies having anything to do with Richard's murder. Detectives, of course, play the good cop, bad cop scene. They hammer him with questions, and he agrees to a polygraph, but the results are inconclusive. He tells the cops that, despite his divorce, he was trying to reconcile with his unemployed ex-wife, and he just viewed Stacy as a means to an end. But the police start wondering, well, did Richard know? Was he probably trying to prevent this affair? Detectives keep digging, and they check Juan's alibi and chat with his ex-wife, who tells them that his relationship with Stacy was too close, but she confirms his alibi. Juan Rees is cleared. Investigators know that there's at least one clue at the scene, the set of tire tracks, and they start searching, obsessively trying to match the brand of tire tread marks to a killer. that the tire they're looking for is a Goodyear Integrity. But there are countless cars using Goodyear tires in the area. Searching each one could be an overwhelming task, and just as cops are about to lose hope, an unexpected tip quickly leads the cops to wonder if Stacy wanted to eliminate her fifth husband. An IT technician at the clinic where Stacy worked called the police. His job was to clear out junk mail from the employees' accounts. And he said, "When I went through Stacy's computer, I went on to go ahead and empty the spam out of her inbox, but her inbox was completely empty for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the day of the murder." And he said, "That's very unusual, but I have backups of all of those files if you guys would like them." And the police said, "Well, absolutely we would." Detectives immediately obtain a warrant for Stacy's emails. After scouring 4,000 of them, 2 of them raise eyebrows. One of them was written a few weeks before the murder to a bank. Request to transfer $8,902 from a real estate account that the doctor's office had into the personal account of a lady named Lenitra Ross. Lenitra Ross was a medical assistant at the practice where Stacy worked. Curiously, there was another transfer to her just days before Valentine's Day. The Friday before the murder, there's another request for $1,100, and it goes into Lenitra Ross's personal bank account. Cops investigate, and they learn that Lenitra was renting a home from Stacy, and they immediately pay her a visit, and she tells them that she received the $8,900 for home repairs on this rental house. She said that she could provide the repairs and that she knew a guy and she would just pay him. So they kind of investigate what type of repairs. I guess it was a water leak, and Lenitra said it would have been about $10,000 to repair. So that sort of explains the money, right? No. Then another clue surfaces. This time from Stacy's cousin, Connie Hearn, that I mentioned earlier. She calls about the grandparents' car. It was an Impala, and she's pretty insistent that the police look at it, or take a look into it. The Impala was given to Stacy to sell, and the money was supposed to be used for the grandparents' medical expenses. But strangely enough, that Impala went missing out of Stacy's driveway, and then suddenly showed back up. But what didn't appear was the money. Stacy claimed that she had gotten about $14,000 for the car, but the grandparents never saw any of that money, and Connie really thought it was kind of weird. But even more suspicious, investigators find the Impala parked at Lenitra Ross's house, and it has Goodyear Integrity tires on it. So, who's driving the Impala the night that Richard was murdered? The evidence at the scene, based on the layering of the tire impressions, revealed to the officers that this person lay in wait for Richard to show up. And this is where Lieutenant Franklin, in my mind, goes above and beyond. On a hunch, he starts investigating cell phone records. My thought process is this person who's sitting there just gonna twiddle his thumbs? Or what's he gonna do? He's gonna make a phone call or text. And he subpoenas phone records around the time of the murder. And he does something that I've never heard of, something called a tower dump. And he describes it like this. myself how to do this. And about an hour into that search, I find a number that was in Stacy's phone that made a call from Belton Bridge Park, or the tower that serves Belton Bridge Park, on the night of the murder at 8:40 p.m. And this phone call at 8:40 is very compelling. The phone number person attached to that phone call was listed in Stacy's contacts as a guy named Reggie. Now, Reggie was known as Mr. Results. And even more compelling was the number that Reggie dialed. Lieutenant Franklin says, I went back and I looked, and I should have recognized the number because it was already in my notes. Guess who? Lenitra Ross. So at 8:40 p.m. on February 14th, whoever Reggie is, who's known to Stacy because he's in her cell phone, he calls Lenitra Ross from the park. So who is this Mr. Results, Reggie? Lieutenant Franklin Googled him the next day and found that Reggie is a man named Reginald Coleman. And he's a personal trainer, a former semi-professional boxer who held boot camp sessions at Stacy's office. And at this point, Lieutenant Franklin says everything starts coming together. They're already thinking we're looking at a murder for hire, and this really solidified that the third part of the triangle. We suspected Stacy was the linchpin. Lenitra Ross got the money, and now here was our third person that we felt did the deed. These clues have investigators thinking that Stacy is in neck deep, and possibly the mastermind behind this whole thing. But do the police have enough to charge her? So Reggie makes the phone call at 8:40 p.m. from the park on the night of Richard's murder. And we believe that it's a call to let Lenitra know that it's done, says Lieutenant Franklin. And then he uncovers a series of bone-chilling text messages. 3 minutes after that phone call, Lenitra texted Stacy and said, "Forgot to tell you I'm coming in late tomorrow. By the way, Happy Valentine's Day." And it turns out the Happy Valentine's Day was a signal from Lenitra to Stacy that Richard was dead and she could leave the office to go find him. Lieutenant Franklin soon scoured the banking records of Stacy, Lenitra, and Reggie, revealing thousands of dollars intermingling among the different accounts. Reggie's payment for the murder was $10,000 in cash. Lenitra's payment for being the person that distributed the money was that Stacy was doing that. She distributed the money. She was able to live in Stacy's house rent-free forever. And Lieutenant Franklin says, now we know we're looking at a murder for hire. We had to bring in the money, and once we had those financial records, we were ready to move forward with the arrests. And the day is long coming, but the cops can now make their move and capture Stacy. The operation was called Operation Tangled Web, and it was a huge coordinated effort. It took lots of planning. Lieutenant Franklin said we served 7 search warrants in 4 different counties, 3 arrest warrants, all in one day. Their biggest challenge was synchronizing the arrests so that the murderous players could not tip each other off. The first to go down was Reggie, and then Lenitra was nabbed at a traffic stop, and then police confidently swoop in to Stacy's office. Can you believe? I can't even imagine the police storming in to arrest somebody at their office. Somebody in the office told Stacy that the police were there and to run. And so she did. She retreated into the hospital and basically got herself into an area that was restricted access. You had to swipe a card to get in the room, and the police couldn't get to her. She did eventually surrender to the police. I couldn't find out how long they were in a standoff, though, and I really wanted to know that. Finally, 3 months after Valentine's Day, Richard is getting some relief. In the interrogation room, Lenitra plays the innocent bystander. Reggie denies everything. And cops say Lenitra and Reggie agreed to the murder plot, all for the money. But the real question is, why did Stacy want her husband dead? In a stunning twist, Stacy tells the police that Richard had been molesting her sons. She says that her claim is based on something one of her kids told her, and tells investigators that this had happened to her as a child, and so to protect her children, she wanted Richard killed. She confided in her work buddy Lenitra and told her she didn't want to mess with the police, she didn't want a divorce, she just wanted him dead because he was molesting her children. And according to Stacy, Lenitra volunteers up Reggie. He was her sometime boyfriend and the father of her child. And Stacy says she was like, Reggie, really? And Lenitra says, yeah, that's what he does. That's how he supplies his income. My dog is so loud, I'm sorry. Stacy tells the cops that Lenitra arranged a meeting where they cooked up a plan to murder Richard in cold blood. And Reggie is like, okay, I hear you need help getting something done. And Stacy says, yeah, well, maybe. I have a strong suspicion that I think he's messing with my kids. And I asked him how much, and Reggie says, oh, well, I was thinking like 10,000. And Stacy was like, yeah, okay. To sweeten the deal, Stacy decides that she'll give Reggie her grandparents in Paula, and Lenitra would get the house. A week later, all three of them met and scouted out the crime scene at Belden Bridge Park. Reggie believes it's the perfect place and even says he should use it more often. But the night of the murder, Reggie apparently botches things up. Stacy wanted it set up to look like a robbery. In fact, she was really angry that Richard's watch and money were not taken, to make it look like a robbery. But that's not all that Stacy says Reggie screwed up. Richard was shot several times in the chest and in the face. Stacy said, well, I didn't want him to suffer, so it was supposed to be just one shot to the head. Okay, you want him dead, but you don't want him to suffer? Lady, what is wrong with you? And as for the molestation story, the police learned that Stacy's son later said Richard never laid a finger on him. He said, no, I'm sorry, I exaggerated. I'm sorry I said those things. I blew them out of proportion. The comment he made didn't have anything to do with anything like that, but rather that Richard was a little bit more restrictive than Stacy was about what they could do. Stacy later revealed a different and supposed real reason she ordered the hit. Now she claimed that she feared losing custody of her kids to Richard if they divorced. Lieutenant Franklin said, ultimately, I think her motive was to live a life free of Richard, and in her eyes, this was the only way to make it happen. Stacy was controlling, conniving, and manipulative. She used people to the extent that she needed them, and beyond that, they just didn't matter. The trio thought that they committed the perfect murder and that they could easily outsmart these small-town cops, but they were wrong. With so much evidence against them, Stacy and Reggie pled guilty and were convicted of malice, but she was convicted of the same charge, and all three of them will spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Since her conviction, Stacy's been a busy lady. Her family says that she has found God, and she is now studying to be an ordained minister. Her three sons are now adults, and the youngest lives with his biological father, and reportedly they are doing very well. So thank you guys so much for joining me for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I don't think I've ever done a case where a hitman has been hired to take someone's life. I thought this story was absolutely bonkers, and the way that the police put it together, just that Lieutenant Franklin was like, I'm gonna find me who did this, and he did. I've never ever heard of a cell tower dump before, and I'm surprised that they don't use it in more cases, newer cases of course, but absolutely just bonkers to me. But thank you for joining me on my Love and Murder series. I will catch you next time.